I'm Kyle Roed, and this is the Rebel HR Podcast. Rebel HR is a podcast for HR professionals who are ready to make some disruption in the world of work. Follow us online on Facebook at Rebel HR Podcast, rebelhumanresources.com, or follow me on Twitter at Rebel HR Guy. All right, listeners, thank you so much for joining us. Super excited for our guest this week. His name is Paul Farmer. He is an innovator and entrepreneur in our local community here. We are joined, as always, by our wonderful, talented co-host, Molly Burdess. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, Paul, I'd like to start with you giving us a little bit of an overview into your background. You're not a traditional HR practitioner, so I think it'd be great to hear a little bit about your story.
That's a true story. They have not let me into HR as of yet. My background, actually, I started in high school working for a financial institution and decided that I kind of liked that. And so I've been in banking for the last 20 some odd years. But I also had this parallel where I dreamed as a child to be a Disney Imagineer. And about 10 years or so ago, my two worlds kind of came together, and the credit union that I work for, I was able to lead some of the innovation and continuous improvement work. And then alongside that, I've always just had a passion for solving problems, and usually that came in the form of starting up little businesses here and there, and have been doing that as well along the way. So it's been pretty fun, crazy ride. Not a lot of free time.
Yeah. So in your free time, what do you do for fun?
Great question. Usually, I'm an outdoors person. I love to camp and hike and fish and just be outside. So
Yeah, it's been that's been one of the positive things in COVID. Living in the middle of nowhere in Iowa is we've been socially distancing since the 1800s, right? So we can go outside, get fresh air, and stay 6 feet apart from everybody we see.
No doubt.
So, Paul, what would you consider to be your calling? How did you get into some of the endeavors that you found yourself going into?
I see myself definitely as an opportunist, but also someone who I'm a problem solver by nature. And so when I see something that doesn't just fit right, then I'm always looking for a way to solve it, whether that be starting a business or creating a new app or what that might be. I'm just always looking for easier ways to get things done.
What do you wish that you would have known when you were starting out?
Oh, gosh. Well, there's some things you wish you would have known, and then there's some things you're glad you didn't know. Some of those things of it's there's a reason why not everybody's in business, right? Because it's hard. And if we all knew that, then nobody would probably be in business. So I'm kind of glad I didn't know that it was as hard as it was going to be. But things that I wish I would have known, that it's okay to share your idea. I think that's one of the biggest learnings early on is everyone wants to keep those ideas really close to their vest, because if I share it, then you might steal it, right? And as you start to figure things out, as you start to do this more and more, you realize the idea is extremely cheap. There's nothing special about the idea. It's executing on the idea that actually is worth something. And so now, I'm an open book and sharing ideas all the time, because if you can do it faster and better, well, knock yourself out, because it's never as easy as you think it's going to be.
My personal issue with that is I don't share my ideas not because I'm afraid somebody's going to steal them, but because I'm afraid I'm going to look like an idiot.
One of my favorite quotes from Albert Einstein has, and I'm going to probably slaughter it, but something to do with, if at first it doesn't seem absurd, then there's no value to it. And so I have that in my office, and kind of I look at that often, especially when I get that person shaking their head at me thinking, what are we doing here? So
Yeah, it's something I've learned and had to practice for sure. And part of it, I think, is what I've found is who I surround myself with and the culture that I have. If it's in business, like, if I have a team that's negative, 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 or is going to tear down, you're not fostering that, right? So surrounding yourself with those positive people, I think, is insanely important when it comes to innovation and also risk taking. That's what I'm finding anyway. And I am not a risk taker by nature, so it takes a little practice.
Yeah, it does. It does. Risk taking is definitely one of those things that you have to overcome.
Yeah, I just think that's an inherent trait in a lot of HR people. We're relatively risk averse. A lot of us like a lot of rules. We get
Yeah.
the rap as being the policy police. I don't know about you, Molly, but and then you wonder why people don't follow the policy and then you realize, oh, the handbook's like 100 pages long and nobody's gonna remember any of this.
Right.
After they sign this.
Yeah, I get that.
But I think to be strategic, actually, I know to be a strategic HR leader in any role, you have to be innovative. Like, how do we overcome that? If it's not natural to you, how do people overcome it?
Yeah, well, great question. I mean, gosh, this year is an example of how we've all been forced to do that, right? With COVID and everything else, like it or not, maybe kicking and screaming out the door, but we had to overcome that and embrace the fact that things weren't going to be the same as they've always been, and we have to be okay with change. I joke a lot of times that I need a Chase lounge in my office because of the I put my psychiatry hat on when working with people around innovation and continuous improvement because there's a psychological element there of letting go and being okay with change. And I've had people with tears and then later look back and go, why on earth was I so emotional about, letting go of this or that or embracing whatever that new thing is. And, taking the time to just step back and get out of your own way and practice standing in a place different than you're used to and trying to look at things through a different lens. I think is a good start to getting out of your own way, to embracing change and embracing the fact that it's not about you 9 times out of 10. They make it about them and it's really not about them.
I was just thinking, like, what part of innovation is people and what part of it is processes?
Yeah, good question. Those two definitely, go hand in hand. I don't think you have one without the other. I think it's both. The innovation is really people with the ability to look at something differently. It's incremental to disruptive, but ultimately it starts with someone who's solving a problem in a different way. The innovation is going to stick if it's truly solving a problem and the right problem. That's often the hardest part, is making sure you're solving the right one.
Yeah, so take me through an example of a time where you had an employee or you had an individual that you were consulting through a change or developing an innovation. How did you work them through the process, and how did you ultimately get the desired result? Give me an example of one of those.
I think the tools that I use most often come from actually from a lot of the continuous improvement work or lean work that typically you find in manufacturing, but a lot of organizations are embracing, even in service organizations like the one I work for. Really, it's about getting people to see the path themselves. I typically go into a situation where we're trying to solve a problem with an idea of where the solution probably lies. But by helping the team actually get there on their own, then you have inherently the buy-in that you need to make that change because they're owning the change versus you placing the change upon them. We look at how things are running today, then we talk about how we want things to be and kind of lay out that utopia, and then how we're going to get there, and we take that cross-functional team and we talk about how we're going to get there, and then as a team we decide what that solution's going to be, and then that team goes out and shares that with all their coworkers. And then it's not coming from a manager, and it's not coming from me as or any other leader in the organization. It's coming from the team itself that's in and around the process where the change is happening.
So I'm curious. So is your perspective that there's already an idea of what the right thing to do is in mind, or does the team truly develop that?
I think it's a little bit of both. Typically, there's a general direction that you're going to head. Oftentimes, it gets polished and better than, we truly believe that the group is going to come up with a solution better than any one person could, right? However, you typically have a direction you think it's going to go, and a lot of times you do go in that direction, but there's shifts and changes and things that you uncover that you wouldn't have had you not included the people that are in and around the process in the conversation itself.
Sure, I think that's one of the potential pitfalls, especially for an HR person, when you're rolling out change, and we're doing that all the time, especially in 2020,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Is we can assume that we think we know what the right solution is,
Mm-hmm.
and we go about it and we just roll something out. And
sure.
Hey, everybody, here, get behind this and sign on the dotted line that we reviewed this. That's kind of that's a lot of times that's the approach because it's easy. So what advice would you give to somebody in our role, or a leader of people who's got what they think is a pretty clear idea of the direction we need to go? How do they bring the team along for the ride when they've already essentially defined where they're going?
Well, I think you have to be open to the fact that you might be wrong. So if you're not, then I would just stick with the original plan. So you go in with an idea of the direction it's probably going to go, but you still have to be open to the fact that it might not go that way. So if it truly is, this is the way we have to go, then, I think you go back to the typical, helping people see why or this or that. But if you're truly open to the idea of the individuals in and around that process, and it could be at any level of the organization, right? It could be frontline, all the way to C-suite individuals who then come together and look at that whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, and with some constraints, solve the problem at hand. A clear problem statement is ideal. You need a clear cut. This is the problem we're trying to solve. Then you need clear constraints. Here are the rules that we have to abide by when solving that problem. Because if you just tell people to think outside the box is infinite, right? It goes forever. But if you reframe the box outside the box and say, this is the sandbox we get to play in to solve this problem, then that helps people focus in and come up with a solution to whatever it is, whatever problem you're trying to overcome, and come up with solutions. And maybe together we go the direction you thought we were going to go, and maybe it's a little bit different, but you got to be open to that.
Some things that I've done in my career to foster innovation within our organization is, of course, surveys, right? I think that's probably the most common thing. But we've also offered an award or an incentive for people to be innovative. So submit an idea how to improve a process or improve our organization. If that idea gets implemented, you get X dollars as a bonus. Mm-hmm. What are some other ways you have seen organizations or leaders foster innovation within their workplace?
Yeah, I think those are some popular ones. I think those can be challenging, right? Especially if you don't have a specific problem to solve. I've seen people that do some sort of idea generation tools. There's several of them out there where you post a problem to solve, and then everyone is submitting solutions to that problem to solve. Then you start to naturally see leaders of those solutions come forward, because a lot of these tools are using some sort of almost Facebook social media style platform where you have a conversation thread going there. So that's one way that I've seen people do it, using lean methodology, where you're going in and they talk about walkabouts, where you're walking through the processes and looking at different things, and then just identifying those little incremental shifts that add up to innovation is another way of doing it. That would be almost the two different spectrums there.
We've talked a lot about innovation, and I know in past conversations with you, we talked about the word pivot, which is, I think, going to be the theme for 2020. I just think about that Friends episode where they're on the stairs and stairwell with the couch and just yelling pivot at each other. That's pretty much been 2020 at this point in HR. Or I call it like the 2020 whack-a-mole. It's like, which crisis are you dealing with today, and where are you dealing with it at, and which department, which city, whatever. So tell me what you have done within your organizations to pivot into 2020's new reality.
Well, most recently, my business partner and I this spring, with every problem like this fosters opportunity. We're thinking about, okay, how are we going to do this? How are people going to shift? And to use your word, pivot, which I love that. I use pivot all the time, and then the Friends episode instantly comes up in the group. How are we going to pivot on this and think of ways to help people in different areas? And the one area we're talking about is team building. I'm a social creature. I love to, and I think at one level or not, everyone is. We need that interaction with each other. And so how do you foster that interaction? How do you do that team building in this virtual world that we're living in right now? And my business partner and I also like to do talk about escape rooms. He actually builds escape rooms, and we like to do them. And so we said, okay, well, how do we take that same concept and make it virtual? And so we looked at a way, we talked about, well, what's important about team building? When you go and do that with your team, what's important about that, and how do we recreate that in this environment? We talked about problem solving and getting people engaged and making sure that one person isn't kind of floating in the background, or how do you do an element of trust, that I'm going to trust that you're going to do what you need to do, those types of things. And so we came up with this virtual escape room as our first go, and we're calling this business Squad Ready. And Squad Ready's first virtual escape room has a pirate theme. It's kind of fun. You're using an avatar to navigate around this island. The storyline goes that your ship has crashed on here, and the Navy is after you, and you've got an hour to get out of there. And every good escape room's got a nice storyline. So we've got the story, and you're walking your pirate around, and as a team in this game setting, you're figuring out how you're going to get off this island. So it's been pretty fun.
Are pirate noises obligatory?
You do have to work on your pirate voice as you because you talk to each other, and should have some sort of coaching ahead of time as to proper pirate etiquette in terms of speech and other things. Would be fantastic.
Interesting approach. For me, I'm extremely competitive, and I just want to win.
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily always work the best in an escape room environment. So how do you foster the interaction between the people doing the escape room versus somebody who's just like a gamer and is like, oh, I'm gonna go find all these elements, I'm sure this is the next thing, and just doing it by themselves. How do you foster the teamwork aspect?
The teamwork aspect, we've got puzzles in there where it takes 3 people to actually solve the puzzle, and you have to work together. All 3 of you have to. There's a couple different ones that do that. We plant a couple of the I don't want to give away too many of my secrets here, but we plant a couple of the things that you need to get out of there in individual's inventory, but what you have is different from what I have. So you plant a couple things like that so that one person can't just be running ahead and gathering that. I think there naturally some leaders are going to emerge, and that's good conversation. I think that happens in your traditional teamwork type environments where a leader is going to emerge and kind of take charge, and having some conversation about that is really good. But what we're able to do in a virtual environment is we're able to force interaction that you can't do outside a virtual environment, where you say, okay, if you want to get out of here, this person's going to have to participate because they've got a piece of the puzzle that nobody else has. So we've planted some different elements in there like that to just make sure everybody's engaged and in a way to get you out of there.
Cool. Molly, have you ever done an escape room?
I sure have. I'm awful at it. They're really fun though, but I'm not great at it. I always miss the little hints. But I am very, inclusion is one of my core values. So I'm happy and content to go into those escape rooms. And I look at it as my job just to make sure that everybody's participating and everybody's including everybody. So it works out.
Right.
So you're the connector. Yeah. I'm the one that I just want to finish as fast as possible. So I start to maybe not foster that sense of teamwork and camaraderie as much.
Do you bulldoze? Are you a bulldozer?
I can neither confirm nor deny that label.
Yeah. It's interesting. You keep saying pivot. I've been talking with my team a lot this week specifically about pivoting from survival mode to thriving. Like, we have to get out of this. We're just trying to get through the year. We're just trying to get through 2020 because it's not going to do our business any good. It's not going to do ourselves any good. Like, we have to pivot from surviving to thriving.
I think it's a really good point, though, and one that we're hanging on to as well, because you can look at this year and kind of you can do that same thing with as little of something as team building, right? You can say, oh, we're just going to do that next year because we're gonna plow our way through the rest of this year, and then next year we'll go back to that normal stuff. And what we're saying is don't wait till next year, because for a lot of good reasons, and do some of these things, and we've tried to figure out another way to do that with this new concept, and there's lots of other ways to do that too. People have figured out how to have a drink together at 4 and everybody's on the screen and this and that. But what I will say about this that's different is the interaction is different. It feels a little more real, as crazy as that sounds, because you're working on solving a problem together and you're playing a game together, versus when you try to have a drink over the screen, it still doesn't feel like you're next to me. That just doesn't feel right. Where in this case, we've created this virtual world that isn't like anything else. So you're not, you don't have that something to compare it to that then feels off, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. And I would agree with that. I've done some of the, there's been some virtual happy hours, and there's some like happy hour podcasts and that kind of thing. And for me, it's just like, by the end of my day in HR, I just want to sit and not stare at a screen. I'm like zoomed out. Right. I've got this Zoom fatigue, and even if I'm just, staring at nothing, I'd rather not watch a screen. But that's an interesting psychological principle, that because you don't expect it to be any certain way besides on a screen and in a game environment, you're perfectly comfortable with it.
Right.
That's interesting. So it's like Call of Duty, but work appropriate and fosters teamwork.
Yes, that would.
Call of Duty did not sponsor this podcast, by the way,
Right,
unless they
right,
want to.
right.
I'd be happy to
I
do
was
that.
gonna say we'll take them if they want to, but yes, it's that first person without the shooter part. So that first person character, yes, work appropriate and a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I find it so fascinating. I think 2020 is going to go down. We're going to look back at it, and we're all going to think, wow, what a wild year.
Mm-hmm.
But I also look at, the silver lining and everything. And if you look at all of the advancements that have been accelerated in the world of technology, training, workplace communication, communication in my company is better than it's ever been.
Yeah.
Because we're all talking face to face and not in the same room, but we're face to face, via technological means. I think this is a really interesting approach to some of the face to face trainings that we've tried to do, or team building events that HR has tried to do, sometimes successfully, sometimes not.
Right.
I don't know how you do. How can you do virtual trust falls? Does anybody figure that one out yet?
We actually had that conversation very early on, because that's like the poster child of team building events. Is, how do you recreate that trust? And we haven't figured out the trust fall just yet.
Okay, so here's what I'm thinking in my mind. I don't know if it makes sense, but have you seen those videos where somebody accidentally stands up and then they're in their underwear? What am I gonna trust my team to tell me, and then am I gonna trust my team to do something with that information?
I'm glad the HR person is saying that example and not me, but yes, that's an option for you.
I don't encourage our listeners to wear their underwear and see if people say anything. But Molly, that's a hey, you work in a really progressive company. Yeah, my favorite awkward Zoom moment is it happens. I think it happens at every meeting. It's you're muted, and it's like, okay, who's the first one that's going to tell them? So Paul, where is this app at in the development stage? Is it have you gone live? Are you still doing some testing, or how do we find out more about this?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. So squadready.com, and it's squad SQUAD -ready READY.com. It is just about to launch. So we're hoping here this first part of October to have it ready to go. We're doing our last of tests right now. It's going to be fun. So we are getting ready to roll it out here real shortly.
So we are going to do a new segment for podcast. I'm going to call it the Rebel HR Flash Round. So first question is, what are you reading right now?
You didn't ask me, but I want to play, because I am reading John DeJulius, The Customer Service Revolution, and I'm getting so many great ideas from this book. And then I'm reading the next one that is called What's the Secret by the same guy. It's all about customer experience, and it's amazing. Highly recommend it.
So I will say I am more of an article guy. That's usually my attention span. But the book I'm reading right now is called Scaling Lean, and a really cool book using lean principles for entrepreneurs. So talking about how to take that idea and the different tools to use to get that idea off the ground, that business off the ground. It's a pretty cool book.
All right, second question. Who should we be listening to?
I'm a big Simon Sinek fan myself. I am a TED Talk junkie. I there again, my attention span, 17 minutes, that's perfect. That's about all you're going to get. And then I'm off to the next squirrel running across the Simon Sinek. He just, I really believe in purpose behind whatever it is that you're doing, and that problem solving, and he just I really enjoy listening to him.
Molly, do you want to play along? I don't want to leave you out.
Oh, thanks. I'm usually not very good at these. I'm gonna take that same path. Dax Shepard. I've been listening to him a lot, and just his humility and his honesty, it just grounds me.
Yeah, great podcast. My wife listens to the Armchair Expert all the time.
Yep.
All right. And last question. How can our listeners connect with you?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I've got an email address here for Squad Ready right now is pirates@squad-ready.com. So if you want to reach out and learn more about that, I would love to connect with you and pick your brain and see how we can help your team with some team building.
That's great. That's great. He's the lead pirate in Squad Ready.
That's right. That's right. You can refer to me as Captain Paul or Paul. Either one is fine.
I hope I'm not cool to get a cool title like that one day.
All right,
That's right.
Paul. Well, sincerely appreciate the time here today, and I'm sure that our listeners took something away from this. Really appreciate all the work you're doing to keep us all connected and build teams through COVID. So thank you, Captain Paul Farmer.
Right. That's right. It's a new age pirate.
That's right. That's right. A professional pirate.
That's right.
Got
That's
to stay
right.
polished.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, that does it for the Rebel HR podcast. Big thank you to our guests. Follow us on Facebook at Rebel HR Podcast, Twitter at Rebel HR Guy, or see our website at rebelhumanresources.com. The views and opinions expressed by Rebel HR Podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any of the organizations that we represent. No animals were harmed during the filming of this podcast.
Baby.